Before the sun touches the peaks, before the first light breaks across the Hindu Kush, a woman is already moving through the dark. The temperature has dropped to -22 degrees overnight. The ground is a sheet of compressed ice, and the path she walks has no railing, no lamp, no safety margin. She carries 2 clay vessels suspended from a wooden pole across her shoulders, and she is walking toward a frozen river, because her family cannot survive this day without water. This is winter life in Afghanistan's remote highland villages, and it begins before dawn, in the cold, in the dark, with weight on your back and ice under your feet. Most people, when they think of survival, think of dramatic moments. They picture emergencies, rescues, moments of crisis. But in the high mountain communities of Afghanistan, survival is not a moment. It is a system. It is a schedule. It is a sequence of tasks performed before the sun rises, each one calculated to keep a household alive through one of the most severe winters on Earth. And the woman walking to the river right now is not in crisis. She is doing exactly what the system requires, at exactly the right time, because she was taught when she was 7 years old that the window to reach liquid water before it refreezes lasts approximately 40 minutes. Miss that window, and your household has no water until tomorrow. If this is the kind of story you want to understand more deeply, the kind of story where ordinary life turns out to be extraordinarily engineered, subscribe now and turn on notifications. There is a great deal more of this waiting for you. The villages we are talking about sit at elevations between 2,000 and 3,500 meters in the mountain provinces of Afghanistan, in places like Bamyan, Badakhshan, Nuristan, and Ghor. These are not remote in the way that a cabin in a forest is remote. They are remote in the way that the nearest medical clinic might be 4 days of walking. The nearest paved road might be 2 full days away. In winter, with snow, those distances become theoretical. Because the mountain passes close, the trails vanish, and the community becomes entirely self-contained. Everything the household needs must already be there, or must be produced from what is already there. Nothing is coming from outside until spring. This creates a logic of life that is completely invisible to anyone who has not lived it. Every single decision that a family makes in October is actually a decision for February. Every bundle of wood stacked in autumn is a calculated investment in a January morning, when the temperature at 4 in the morning is cold enough to damage lungs if you breathe too fast. Every jar of preserved food, every dried bundle of herbs hanging from the rafters, every layer of felt pressed against a wall, every stone placed at a specific angle on a rooftop, is part of a system that keeps human life possible in conditions where human life is not supposed to be easy. And at the center of this system, at its most urgent and most precise point, is water. Because water is the one thing that cannot be stockpiled the way flour can be stored or firewood can be stacked. Water moves, water freezes, water thaws at specific times, and water is needed in quantities too large to keep inside indefinitely. So the task of getting water organizes everything else. It structures the morning. It shapes the household's schedule. It determines who wakes first and what they must do before anyone else begins their day. The river is the source, but the river in winter is not what it is in summer. In summer, the mountain rivers of Afghanistan's highlands run fast, cold and clear, fed by snowmelt from the peaks above. In winter, the surface freezes. The river becomes a white floor, and the moving water continues underneath, hidden. What the women who carry water know, and what took generations to observe, is that the ice on top of a fast-moving mountain river is rarely uniform. There are points where the water moves fastest, where the ice above it stays thinnest, where a tool of the right weight struck at the right angle will open the surface and reveal liquid water beneath. Finding those points is not guesswork. It is inherited geography, passed from mother to daughter over decades, sometimes over centuries. The exact bend in the river where the current runs strongest. The exact spot where the ice never fully closes because the flow there never slows. These are locations that only the women of the village know because they are the ones who have gone there every morning across an entire lifetime. This is the first thing that most outside observers miss entirely. The task of carrying water before sunrise looks, to someone passing through, like simple labor. A woman walking with heavy vessels in the dark. Primitive, perhaps. Exhausting, certainly. But what that picture does not show is that the woman knows exactly which point of the river to strike, knows exactly how deep the liquid layer runs this week compared to last week, knows what the air temperature last night tells her about the ice thickness this morning, and knows how long she has before the temperature drops again, and the opening she made refreezes. She is not just carrying water. She is reading an environment in real time and executing a timed extraction from a frozen system. That is engineering. It is just not the kind that comes with credentials. The clay vessels she carries matter as much as the knowledge she brings. The design of these containers is another piece of the system that is easy to overlook. They are wide at the base and narrow at the top. That ratio is not aesthetic. It is thermal. A wide base maximizes the volume of water the vessel holds, while the narrow neck dramatically slows the rate at which the cold air inside the vessel can interact with the water's surface during transport. In other words, the shape of the container slows the freezing process during the walk home. A modern cylindrical bottle of the same volume would begin to develop ice crystals at the surface much faster. The traditional vessel, with its tapered neck and thick clay walls, gives the woman an extra 10 to 15 minutes of liquid water during transport. That margin is exactly what she needs to arrive home with water that can still be poured and used. The wooden pole across her shoulders distributes the weight symmetrically, protecting her spine across a walk that might cover 1.5 kilometers of uneven frozen terrain each way. But the pole also functions as a balance tool on the ice. If the path is slick, which it always is in January and February, the pole held outward on both sides allows micro-corrections in balance that would be impossible carrying the vessels by hand. The pole is not just a carrying device. It is a stability system for moving heavy cargo across a surface with near-zero traction. Now here is where the story deepens, because the water she carries does not simply enter the household and disappear. What happens to that water inside the home is the next layer of a system that has been refined across generations. The interior of a traditional Highland Afghan home in winter is built around a single dominant reality. Heat is the most precious resource, and every calorie of it must be preserved, directed, and extended as far as it will go. The walls of these homes are built from a combination of mud, brick, and stone, often more than 0.5 meter thick. This is not because thick walls look solid or feel safe. It is because a wall of that mass takes an enormous amount of cold to penetrate. The physics at work here is thermal lag. The cold outside might reach its lowest point at 3 in the morning, but by the time that cold has moved through 50 centimeters of dense mud brick, it is already past 5 in the morning, and the fire inside has been relit. The wall delays the cold's arrival long enough for the household's heat source to counteract it. The mass of the wall is a clock. It buys time. The water brought in before sunrise enters this thermally managed space and is placed close to, but not directly next to, the central heat source. Directly next to would cause uneven heating, cracking the clay and wasting heat on the vessel rather than on the air the family breathes. At a calculated distance, the water warms slowly, stays liquid, and is available throughout the morning for cooking, for drinking, for washing hands before the children eat. That placement is deliberate. A woman who has spent 30 winters in that home knows exactly where to set the vessel, so it thaws without cracking, without boiling, without freezing again if the fire dips in the night. The fire itself is worth understanding, because it is not simply a fire. It is a rationed resource. The fuel, primarily dried animal dung mixed with compressed grass bundles and whatever wood can be gathered from the sparse high-altitude scrub, is measured carefully across the winter months. A family that burns too generously in November may find themselves with critically low reserves in March, which is historically the deadliest month in Highland Afghan winters. The cold does not end in February. It often intensifies in early spring, precisely when fuel reserves are lowest, and when the body, after months of cold and limited nutrition, is most vulnerable. March is the month that kills. And the families who survive March are the ones who rationed in November. So the fire is lit in the morning, managed through the day, banked in the evening. Banked means covered with ash to reduce oxygen and slow the burn, preserving the core of heat through the night, so that in the morning it requires only minimal fuel to bring back to full flame. A banked fire is not a dying fire. It is a sleeping fire. It is a thermal battery that has been carefully maintained so it can be reactivated at the moment it is needed, without requiring the household to expend precious resources, reigniting from scratch every morning in sub-zero temperatures. If you are watching this, and you are beginning to realize that this household is running a more sophisticated energy management system than most people run in modern apartments, you are not wrong. Leave a like on this video if this is shifting how you see traditional life, and subscribe if you want to keep going deeper into these stories. The children in this household wake second, not first, because the first hour of a Highland Afghan winter morning is not safe for children to be outdoors, and the tasks of that first hour require adult strength and specific knowledge. But by the time the water has been brought in, the fire rebuilt, and the first warmth of the interior has stabilized, the children are awake. Their first task, before eating, is to check the animals. The livestock, typically a combination of goats, sheep, and perhaps a single cow or a pair of donkeys, do not live outside in winter. This is another detail that outside observers sometimes find surprising, as if keeping animals inside a human dwelling is a sign of poverty or disorder. But the logic is immediate and absolute. At minus 20 degrees, an unprotected goat dies. More precisely, a goat's milk production collapses first. Then its body temperature drops. Then its young, if it is carrying them, are lost. The animal is not just a companion. It is a food system. Its milk feeds children. Its body heat contributes measurably to the interior temperature of the home. A single adult goat produces roughly the same heat as a small candle, but 20 goats in an enclosed space produce warmth equivalent to a significant secondary heat source. The animals are kept inside because they are alive, and alive they contribute. Dead from cold, they are a loss the family cannot afford. The animal section of the home is partitioned, but not sealed. Air moves between the animal area and the human living space, and that airflow is intentional. The animal's body heat flows toward the family. The family's fire warmth flows back toward the animals. It is a shared thermal environment managed by proximity and airflow, and it is a solution to two problems simultaneously: keeping animals alive without additional fuel, and supplementing interior warmth without burning more of the stored reserves. The morning feeding of animals is a task the children can perform, and doing it teaches them something essential. It teaches them observation. A child who feeds a goat every morning across an entire winter learns to read the animal's behavior in a way that no formal education could replicate. A goat that is not eating is a goat that is sick, or cold, or in early labor. A goat that is eating but moving strangely has an injury, possibly from ice on the interior floor. A goat that is eating well and moving normally is a goat that will produce milk today. The child learns this by doing it daily for years, until the reading becomes automatic, until it requires no conscious thought. This is the mechanism by which survival knowledge transfers in a community that has no library, no clinic, and no external support system. The knowledge lives in the body. It transfers through repetition, through proximity, through doing. While the children manage the animals, the mother has begun the first cooking of the day. And this is not a simple act either. In Highland Afghan winter communities, the first meal of the day serves multiple functions beyond nutrition. It must provide enough caloric density to sustain heavy physical labor in extreme cold. It must use fuel efficiently, meaning nothing is cooked that does not need cooking, and the heat from cooking is extracted as completely as possible. The pot is not removed from the fire when the food is ready. It is kept on until the heat has also warmed the space directly above the flame, dried any moisture that has accumulated on the ceiling, and contributed to the general thermal state of the room. The food itself is a system. Dried legumes, grain, dried herbs, preserved fat from the autumn slaughter, sometimes dried fruit. These are foods chosen not only because they store without refrigeration, but because they release calories slowly. A bowl of dried chickpea stew eaten at 6 in the morning is still generating warmth inside the body at 10. The body running on slow-release calories in extreme cold is a body that can sustain physical work without the catastrophic energy drops that come from fast-burning foods. The women who designed this diet over generations were not nutritionists, but the results of their design match what nutritionists would recommend for sustained energy in sub-zero working conditions almost exactly. By mid-morning, the household is in full operation. The older children may be set to tasks like processing grain with a hand mill, repairing tools, mending clothing, or sorting through stored food to check for spoilage. The father, if present, may be managing the heaviest outdoor tasks, clearing snow from the roof before the weight becomes structural, feeding livestock that are too large to be kept entirely indoors, or making whatever repairs to the exterior of the home that the night's conditions have made necessary. Roof clearing is urgent because these homes are built with flat or gently sloped earthen roofs, and a flat roof under 2 or 3 feet of accumulated snow is a roof under serious structural stress. The clearing must happen regularly, not once a week, but after every significant snowfall, and it must happen carefully, because an uneven clearing that leaves a heavy patch on one side can introduce asymmetric loads that crack the supporting beams below. The supporting beams of a traditional Highland Afghan home are the most difficult material to replace. Wood at these elevations is scarce. The trees are small, their growth slow, and the forests have been managed by these communities for generations, precisely because a cracked beam in winter means a collapsed roof in the night, and a collapsed roof in a Highland Afghan winter means death. The beams are therefore the most protected element of the structure. When a woman covers the walls with an extra layer of mud each autumn, she is also protecting the base of those beams from moisture penetration. When a child clears snow from a specific corner of the roof, they are following instructions about which sections carry the most load. The care of the home's structure is distributed across the entire family, and every member knows their part. By early afternoon, the light in these high valleys is already shifting. The sun, which at this latitude and elevation in January stays low in the sky and disappears behind the surrounding peaks far earlier than it sets at the horizon, begins its withdrawal. This is the signal. Afternoon, in a Highland Afghan winter household, is preparation for the coming dark, and the coming dark is long. It lasts 14 hours or more. Everything that needs to happen in daylight must happen now. The second water collection of the day, if needed, occurs in the early afternoon, using the brief thermal window when direct sunlight, even low-angled, slightly raises the surface temperature of the ice and makes the river's accessible points slightly more cooperative. The vessels that held the morning water are dried and inspected. Any crack, no matter how small, is packed with clay immediately. A cracked vessel at dawn is an unusable vessel, and an unusable vessel means the morning's window is wasted. The afternoon is also when preserved food is brought out and assessed. A household heading into the coldest months of winter, January and February, needs to know exactly how much it has left. This is not accounting in the modern sense. It is a physical, tactile knowledge. How heavy is the grain sack? How many dried cakes of pressed fruit remain? How much fat is in the sealed clay pot on the highest shelf, where the temperature stays most stable? The assessment is informal but precise, passed through a practiced hand that has measured these things many times. There is a moment in the late afternoon, just before the fire is rebuilt toward its evening strength, when the household briefly pauses. It is not rest in the sense of leisure. It is the functional pause that allows the body temperature, which has been managed actively all day through movement and food, to signal clearly whether additional warmth is needed before the long night. Children are counted. Animals are checked. The fire is assessed. A decision is made about whether the evening fire will burn at its standard rate or whether tonight's temperature, which the family has read from the wind direction, the sky color, and the behavior of the animals, will require a slightly more generous burn. This decision costs fuel, but getting it wrong costs more. And then the night arrives. The fire is banked. The vessels of water are moved to their calculated positions. The animals settle. The family lies down, layered under pressed wool blankets, in a room that has been warmed through a full day of managed heat, wrapped in walls that will hold the cold at bay for another 6 or 7 hours. Sleep in a Highland Afghan winter home is not a passive event. It is the last thermal strategy of the day. Bodies close together generate heat. The position of sleeping in a circle, with children at the center, is not cultural decoration. It is insulation. The adults on the outside buffer the cold. The children in the center retain their heat longest. Everyone survives the night better because of the arrangement. Sometime before the sky begins to lighten, around 4 in the morning, a woman opens her eyes. She has not been woken by an alarm. She has been woken by the cold. Her body has registered that the fire has dropped below the threshold that keeps the room temperature safe, and it has pulled her out of sleep to act. She rebuilds the fire. She checks the water. She begins to move through the dark, in preparation for what must happen before the sun comes up. The path to the river is ice. The stars are still out. The temperature is somewhere between brutal and lethal for anyone unprepared. And she walks it. Not because she has no choice, but because she has the knowledge, the tools, the timing, and the understanding of a system so deeply internalized that it operates without fear. She has done this hundreds of times. She will do it hundreds of times more. The river is there. The opening in the ice is where she remembers it. The water runs beneath, cold and fast and alive. What she brings back is not just water. It is the first link in a chain that will feed her children this morning, water her animals today, enable cooking, enable cleaning, enable the basic processes of a household that has survived and will survive because every single element of its daily life was designed to work together, not designed by engineers in an office, designed by generations of women and men who watched carefully, who failed and adjusted, who passed their adjustments to their children, who refined and refined until the system worked even in the worst winter anyone could remember. Modern life often treats survival as a dramatic exception, something that happens in emergencies, in wilderness scenarios, in extreme events. But in the highland villages of Afghanistan, survival is the architecture of the ordinary. It is the shape of the clay vessel. It is the position of the sleeping bodies. It is the weight of snow a woman clears from a specific corner of the roof because she knows that corner is above the beam that cannot be replaced. It is the way a child reads a goat's posture at 6 in the morning. It is the timing of a walk to a frozen river in the dark, and the knowledge of exactly where to step. The people who built this system were not primitive. They were precise. They were not cut off from intelligence. They were running it, quietly, in the cold, before anyone else was awake. If you want to see more stories like this, stories of the hidden intelligence in how people have lived and survived across the most extreme conditions on Earth, subscribe to this channel right now, and leave a comment below telling us which community, which place, which forgotten way of living you want to understand next. The deserts, the Arctic, the deep mountain valleys of Central Asia, the floodplains of Southeast Asia, the underground homes of the Sahara. Tell us where to go next. And until then, remember that the most sophisticated engineering in the world is sometimes the walk a woman makes before sunrise, carrying water in the dark, because she knows exactly how.